Good morning to everybody. This is Stefano Mazarin from Italy. Today we have a new guest, Web Union, that will be a new streamer for our group. Before starting, I want to share you some information about the channel and some new updates. Today we will make like a stream of 1 hour and a half about and the first part will be an introduction with the PowerPoint and the presentation of Web Union, and I will collect all the questions about this presentation or anything that will be interesting for you, and after at the end I will close a little bit with a small update about the Italian election scenario. You will see why it would be interesting also about the next streams. About the channel, as you can see, I changed the logo today. It's nothing, let's say, very bad. It's inspired by the Dark Army logo of Mr. Robot, so it's like from the serial. The name of the channel, I repeat to you, it's based by Giulio Mazzarin, an Italian. It was like the author of Bravery of the Politicians. This guy was a very interesting guy from the past. It was like one of the greatest statesmen of the ancient regime, together with Richelieu, so at the time of the Musketeers. So this is the reason of the name of the channel. The goal of the channel, I repeat to you, it's like to lead this time that it's geopolitical, very particular in the world, and to create, let's say, I repeat to you, this is the channel's main objective is to provide the widest possible vision on a global geopolitical issue. The format, it's the same, one main speaker. If we have also the question and answer team, and you can ask questions in real time via the chat, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, everything. This is the new logo. I hope that you like it. And so a little update of the next new streams. We will have this week, August 12 at 5 p.m. 17 Central Eastern Time, a Early Grey, that is like a new UK expat in Russia, based in St. Petersburg. So he will give his point of view about the actual situation in Russia. We will have Marocina, that is like a Moroccan-Italian lady that is actually living in China for work. She is very popular in TikTok, and she is passionate about geopolitics. We will have the 11th streams with her, August 14 at 3 p.m. 15 Central Eastern Time. And the last one that we have to promote, we are trying to organize 2 free streams for a week. It's a huge job because I need to search and find and have a chance to have new streamers like Web Union today. Diego Mezzogiorno from Brazil, that is like friends of mine, politicians, a member of the Italian Chamber of Commerce, is based in Santa Caterina in Florianopolis. He will give us the main point of view about the scenario of the Brazilian general election that will be in October. Why? Because it's interesting, the interconnection of the general election that we will have in Italy, 25th of September, and after also Brazil. Brazil is a huge member of BRICS, so I think these 2 elections could change a lot in the international scenario. About the polls, the updated polls, I will finish this with some little update. Then I will give a stand to Web Union. Nothing really changed about the weekly polls. The 2 main parties are like too close to call, first or second. Brothers of Italy, that is the right party, and Democrats party. The main difference is that in a new concept of the coalition, the Democrat Party lost the agreement with Azione Action, and so probably we will have 4 coalitions or 4 polls. It will mean that it's very clear that probably in the proportional and uninominal, the center right will win a lot of seats, and we will see better in the next streams. I will do another one about it. In this picture that we already saw in this graph, in the other stream, you can see that there is like the 2 parties that are going up. It's Brothers of Italy and Democrats Party, and one that it's like going down. It's 5-Star Movement and Lega. It's very complicated to understand the dynamics in Italy because we have a lot of governments. It's like canonical unstable, but we are living with it without any problem. But it's very important to understand what will happen because Italy is still like the second biggest manufacturer country in Europe. And as I said in the previous stream, Italy and Germany by themselves, it's 50% of the sold things made in Europe. So Italy and Germany, it's half of European Union GDP and production. Let's move to the presentation. I will present to you Weeb Union, that is our new friend and new streamer. He has his own channel with the name that you will find also in the link down of the video. He's passionate about geopolitics. You can find a lot of maps analysis about vector situation in Ukraine and other things in his channel. Today, he will present something different, not with maps. Weeb Union, if you want to make a small presentation about yourself and you can promote a little bit your channel and to start your presentation.
Okay, hello everyone, it's Weeb Union, and I make a lot of analysis about the current war in Ukraine because I was watching it and following the developments, and then I thought that I would make videos about it. So I have my own YouTube channel, and I also do a few analysis on geopolitics and geography, as well as different aspects of the war that no one else talks about, like how many soldiers are in Ukraine and logistics and so on. And that brings us to the presentation I have for us today. If we can begin. Yep. It is why 2022, as in why did Russia pick this year to invade Ukraine? But the main theme is Russian military reorganization. So what do I mean by why 2022? As we all know, or most of us know, the war began in 2014, where there was a change in government in Ukraine and a civil war broke out, where Russia decided to annex Crimea and help the separatists, mainly in Donbass. Now, why didn't they invade in 2014? Why did they delay it for 8 years? There are many reasons for this, but the main one is that Russian military is only 30 years old. And what do I mean by that? I mean, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the Russian military became its own independent part. And there was a lot of chaos following the collapse of the Soviet Union, which made it so that Russia had a very large military capability, but didn't have the population, the soldiers, or everything it needs to set all of this up. So basically what they had done for a lot of years after the fall of the Soviet Union was mainly to make sure that what they had was kept going so that they could use it. But that means that, and developing new technologies. But they didn't expect them to, or they wanted to have an army that could match NATO as they saw it as an adversary. but that costs a lot of money, and Russia has lost a big chunk of their industry with the separation of Ukraine. So Russia was in a situation where they had a lot of weapons, and they had to make sure that all of it was able to be used. And at the same time, they had to recruit more soldiers and a lot of extra things that they had to take care of. But they were in this kind of limbo from the fall of the Soviet Union to about 2014, where all their focus was on getting new technology and making sure that what they have doesn't break. So it was gathering dust, and they weren't really actively improving their military. Now, in 2014, they saw a real existential threat right in front of them, which caused them to start modernizing and reorganizing their military. I picked this quote from a Western think tank that talks about Russia and its military capability. He says, "The true capability of the Russian military is not static, but a rapidly developing phenomenon. And that is mainly because of how they are currently rearming and re-equipping their military and have been for the past 8 years. Now, in 2022, that is when they decided to invade Ukraine. And that is because they were now at a position where they saw themselves as able to win this battle. And they saw that Ukraine was getting closer and closer to joining NATO, which was a big red line for them. Now, really short about what Russian military has become. It's mainly combined arms, which is 10 out of 16 of their army groups. Then there's 2 tank corps and 4 army corps. But even the army corps are heavily reliant on tanks and mobile equipment. They have 20,000 active heavy weapons, which includes infantry, fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, tanks, artillery, self-propelled artillery, and so on. And then they have 58,000 reserve with 12,000 reserve tower artillery. This is an indication of how vast and how large their stockpile is, and how much they had to preserve to make sure that they are able to fight. Now, what experience does the Russian military have? Since they're 30 years old, what experience do they have? Well, they have a lot from the Chechen wars and Afghan war and so on from the late Soviet era, but that doesn't reflect their military capability today. What does is their experience in Syria and in the Ukrainian civil war. Now, in Syria, they had this main operation of, we will provide with air support and tactical strategic help, but not boots on the ground, just like how they were. They're showing what they are capable of through that way. And the soldiers that they did use, they rotated out to give more soldiers experience, but it was a very limited conflict, and they didn't provide enough help. That's why the main part of experience that they did receive was from the Ukrainian Civil War, where there's estimated to be about 10,000 Russian soldiers, and they also rotated them in and out, which gave them a small amount of experience, but experience nonetheless. And then there's been a lot of training with other CSTO countries, and especially China and Syria, which are their strategic allies, where Syria is more like a pseudo puppet state. Now, what kind of problems did they identify? Well, the first one is a lack of manpower. The way they put forward a solution to this was that they would focus on quality over quantity, which is where their obsession with getting new technology comes from. And what did they focus on? Well, they focused on artillery and missile doctrine. As we can see currently from the Ukraine war, the reason why the Russians are suffering less and less casualties is because they move more and more to their style of combat, which is artillery and missile. And they have focused a lot on improving that technology, which means that they currently are in a position where, for example, they have hypersonic missiles, which the United States have failed to develop. However, we do see China achieving that as well. However, it is still at a lower level than Russia. And lastly, affordability. They have such a large stockpile So any more addition to that would put a huge strain on their economy, and they realized that since they aren't that rich as they were under the Soviet Union, they decided let's make our weapons as affordable as possible. That's why we see in a comparison between Russian and American weapons that the price range can be triple or quadruple when it comes to the United States version. A very important part of Russia is their nuclear stockpile, but they also have, other than strategic, their non-strategic nuclear weapons, which are both destructive, unparalleled, and using top-tier rockets. By destructive, I mean these non-strategic nuclear weapons are way smaller than normal nuclear bombs, but they still contain the nuclear elements, which makes it a very destructive bomb, but on such a small scale that it isn't illegal in the international law. So this is actually a weapon they can use, but they've refrained from using out of quote-unquote goodwill. Unparalleled in the sense that they have the largest quantity and they have the capabilities to use them. As we've seen with their Iskander missiles launchers, they have the ability to both launch and defend these rocket launchers. And finally, the top-tier rockets, as I mentioned earlier, the Russians have the highest level of rocket technology in the world. Now, if we talk about the Russian military advantage in Ukraine, we would think that, first of all, they have this massive tank army, so they would probably be faster. However, with the introduction of Javelin and NLAW to the Ukrainian army, we saw that that was put to a halt, as the casualties they suffered was quite large. So they focused on their artillery, where they outgun and outranged the Ukrainians. If we take, for example, normal artillery, according to a Ukrainian official, the Russians were outgunning them by about 10-1. If we look at, for example, the HIMARS, the Russians have the Tornado S, which has the exact same specs, but they have 139 of them compared to the Ukrainian 16. So they have outgunned and outranged the Ukrainian army. A very important aspect to the Russian army, and it's a very secret doctrine, it is their electronic warfare. They have improved the technology in this area as well, as they kind of expected the Americans to help Ukraine. So they decided, what can we do to counter their assistance? And the answer lied in electronic warfare. They have vehicles that can block cell reception, for example, up to 50 kilometers. And they have anti-UAV electronic systems that destroys, for example, the Bayraktar. It can destroy that at a range of 15 kilometers. So they set up these a lot of places in the front line, which is why we have seen a lot less examples of, for example, the Bayraktar destroying Russian tanks, because they cannot get close to the front line. And finally, the Russian occupation. By this, I mean that the areas where they occupy, the population is majorly pro-Russian, as we can see in personal accounts by Ukrainian soldiers, that there was a soldier who experienced fighting in Chernihiv and in Bakhmut, where he said in Chernihiv the population was helping us. In Bakhmut, they were telling the Russian soldiers about our positions. So the area they're currently fighting, they have the advantage in that the population supports them. As we've also seen with the recent lockdown in Mykolaiv, where they've imposed a curfew for 48 hours, where they'll go from house to house to check everyone's phones and documents and so on, to make sure that there aren't any traitors. And finally, a very important point that I've mentioned multiple times, because it is that important, it is their hypersonic missiles. The importance of these are because, for example, if the Russians decided, okay, we go to a nuclear war, with their hypersonic missiles, they will be the one to hit first. And if you know about nuclear doctrine, you would know that there are first strike and second strike policies. First strike is the idea that you are able to destroy the opponent's nuclear capabilities with your first strike. So you remove their ability to retaliate. So hypersonic missiles gives Russia the edge in that doctrine. So as to the conclusion, why 2022? Because Russia wasn't ready in 2014. They weren't capable of invading another country. What has Russia learned? Well, they have learned that in modern warfare, you can't just do World War II style blitzkrieg, as there are a lot of newer technologies that prevent and counter such strategies. What has the West learned? They've learned that Russia, despite all the propaganda, they actually do understand that they are a very viable foe and that their technology rivals that of the West, and that they had a lot of dependence on Russia. So we will see how they develop politically and military from this. As we have seen, Germany has increased their military budget by 100 billion euros instantly. That shows how much of a threat they see Russia as. And finally, this picture that is in the side, that is a threat analysis by the Heritage Foundation that analyzes US capabilities every year, military capabilities annually. It's independent from the United States. It has assessed Russia to be an aggressive but not hostile state, and the capability of the Russian army to be formidable, in the sense that the United States will not be able to help the outermost countries instantly. For example, the Baltic states would fall before the US army arrives, which is why we have seen the US deciding to send more troops and requesting NATO to deploy up to 300,000 soldiers in Europe to make sure that they are able to defend the easternmost borders at a moment's notice. And that's it for the presentation. I have my sources here if you want to read yourself, and that's it.
So perfect. Thank you for the presentation. I'm still trying to collecting some good news. I have some news from some question from the previous stream. There is some question also in this, but please, for the users, send us something very interesting. We are here only to achieve a goal, to try to answer in a proper way to your questions. So one that was it's a very interesting question from one of our best viewer, that is not 42. That was what the future, if any, do you see for the ground effect vehicle in the Southeast Asia? For who doesn't know what is it, this type of vehicle was like in the for the Soviet Union a little bit of new vehicle mainly used in the Caspian Sea. The most famous model was called a Kranoplan, and actually you can find this ground effect vehicle that is completely abandoned on in Azerbaijan, one of them. So if you want to answer or your idea about it.
Okay. The ground effect vehicle, I think, I'm not sure how useful they are in modern combat. It's hard to see where, for example, Russia would use it. It may be used in narrow waters. Like I made a video on Chinese geographic politics, where I mentioned one of the most important choke points that the West has against China is the Malaccan Strait. If they want to trade with the rest of the world, they have to go through there. And it's 500 kilometers long, but it's not that wide. So in an area like that, I think it can be used. But other than that, I think it's out of date.
Perfect. So next question about Caitlin. So Kate asks, any idea of face recognition capabilities of Russia?
I have a slight idea. I know that they have their own version of, for example, GPS, and they have recently launched multiple SATCOMs, which are satellites that do communications. That is especially because of at the start of the war, they weren't really using that much of encrypted discussion with each other. So with NEO satellites, they are able to do that independently from the rest of the world.
Perfect. So another question that is connected to this one of Caitlin. That is, and if or how Russia will ally with China. When say your answer, then I will try also to connect to yours.
Okay. Russia and China are not natural allies. Russia has always eyed the Manchurian area of China, but in modern sense, that would be stupid for them to do or attempt or even think about, as they are neither able to militarily nor population-wise. And so I think currently there's no animosity between them, but they are still competing in this new multipolar world to see who can get the most influence. Currently, Russia is focusing on its surroundings, its own sphere of influence, while China is competing on more global scale. But where their conflict is in Central Asia, where there are already border issues between, I think, Tajikistan and China, and Russia doesn't like China entering its own backyard.
So, just to repeat one point of view that I already said in the other streams, I think that people must read a little bit the history about the relationship of Soviet Union with other countries. I think Russia for sure it's with a big heritage of Soviet Union, and if you check, there is a very good book that it's about the Mitrokin archive. The world was going our way. It's analyzing the way how the Soviets were trying to influence the other countries via KGB or other things, but all the others big powers do it. So it's not like something bad that I'm saying. But the most interesting thing was that the only countries where it was mainly impossible to put infiltrate or KGB house was China. Because let's see, there was a lot of problems also in the borders. There was a lot of tension between the two countries. Historically, there was also a nuclear problem between China and Russia and the Soviet Union. So the actual situation, like there was a chance that there was a nuclear attack from Soviet Union to China in some moment. What is something that is new now? There is a huge change in the last years with the Shanghai Group because there is a lot of cooperation, mainly economically. Russia is still one of the best military supplier of China. But if you look to the balance of the trades, because I think that everybody must think with the mindset of the people what we are talking about. So Russian and Chinese are completely different. Russian mindset, it's still mainly European. You can say whatever you want, but 80% of Russian population live in what geopolitical it's called a Russian core, that is Europe. So it's only 20% that it's in the hugest part of Russia that it's like after the Urals. There is a lot of let's say problem in the border of north or northeast of China. If you go to Vladivostok, you will find more Chinese than Russians. So it's very complicated, the relationship between these two countries. But economically, the interesting thing is that how much is, for example, the GDP of the two countries and the commercial balance. If we check the GDP PPP, like China is the first in the world, US is the second, European Union it's the third. Then we have India, Japan, Germany, whatever, blah blah, and Russia is the sixth with the GDP. But if GDP PPP, but if we make the GDP the GDP list, let's say for normal GDP, we have let's say nominal. So we have still we United States the first, China the second, then Japan, Germany, India, blah blah blah, Italy ninth, Russia it's the 11th. In the balance of trades, China had only less than 3% of the export to Russia, and they have over 50% of the trades with US and the European Union. So economically, if you are Chinese, what you will do? You will make a more agreement with Russia, or you will try to make one fit into shoes, because technically now, and we received a lot of comments about it. The Southeast Asian countries are taking the moment, but it's buying commodities at sales from Russia. Russia is selling oil and gas at a sales price to China and India and whatever. And the Indians and Chinas are reselling in the world market. So it's not something new. An alliance, it's actually a rocky alliance, as Xi Jinping said, but it's technically something that historically it's not true. So it's like hate love relationship between the two countries. So we can see in the next month what will happen.
I'd like to
I
also.
had a very let's say strange question. I didn't know about them because I thought it was let's say joke, but it was about NAFO. I didn't know about NAFO. So the comments arrived explaining what is it. Northern Atlantic Fell Organization, but it's like a meme group on Twitter. I didn't know them. I don't know if you knew them. And it's connected with the Georgian legend. You knew this group or not?
I
NAFO.
have heard about them before, but I've actually also heard that one of the Ukrainian ministries are actually supporting this, and they are also sending weapons and support to Ukraine. And I think, yes, it's mainly meme people on Reddit who support this, but they are actually doing a lot. Also, I've heard that they are actually going around mass reporting accounts to get them banned from social media.
Yes,
if they
like
support Russia.
this is the same, but we are doing fundraising to purchase weapon to support the Georgia Legion.
Yeah.
But technically, it's first time that I heard about them. So, is corruption rampant and a issue in the Russian forces?
Yes, definitely. To say it isn't corruption is completely lying. It is so false that you can't. But I also say that every single country in the world has corrupt military right now. There's no country that isn't corrupt. For example, I am half Danish, and in Denmark, we keep getting articles. We send a frigate to the Baltics to help deter Russia, and then it comes back 3 days later because there's no missiles in it. We sent 450 soldiers to Latvia, but they haven't trained since they arrived because there's no ammunition. So there's no country that doesn't have a corrupt military. But what we see with the war in Ukraine is that Russia is now in active warfare, so there's no place for corruption. Even the most corrupt personnel in Russia, in Russian military, will be doing some kind of thing to help, because if they don't, they will get purged. Because Putin has shown, when he first got rid of the richest person in Russia in 2006, I think, he shows that if someone doesn't follow his orders, he's not afraid to get rid of them, no matter how strong of a position they have. That's also why we see at the start of the war, I think 1 or 2 generals who were in charge of Ukraine have been fired and replaced. So I think there is corruption, but it's becoming less and less the more experience they gain.
Yes, I agree with you. I read and a very interesting report about it, but also I think Ukraine and Russia, it's very similar because the mindset. Everybody can say that it's different, but they're very similar. Mainly the same mindset. It's still a little bit different in Galicia because they are historically a little bit more connected with Poland. But if you go like central, southern, eastern Ukraine, it's mainly Soviet heritage. So there was a very good video of another streamer that it's called Perun, and it's from Australia. It's about the effect of the corruption in the army. Imagine that like the regular salary of military man, it's about $400. So if you have in your hands, let's say something, but I'm telling about Ukraine. Imagine that you have a javelin that you can sell on the black market for $20,000. So you will answer by yourself. Another question: do you think that China will pose a threat to Russia soon in the future? And are the Chinese still keen on regarding Vladivostok? This I said to you before.
I think that in the near future, definitely not. As long as the West and the United States stay united in trying to keep the hegemony of the United States and threatening China in its own borders, which is Taiwan. And no matter what you say, Taiwan also agrees that there's only one China. They just disagree on who rules it. But both agree that Taiwan and China is one country. So U.S. United States interfering and saying they will defend Taiwan is an interference in internal politics of China. Russia doesn't do that. So there they have a common enemy. As someone else mentioned in the chat, that they have same existential problems from the same source. They both consider the wars to be internal issues, and both of them have the United States interfering. So I think they will prioritize fighting the United States before they fight each other. But in the future, if this threat is gone and Russia and China still exist, then they'll probably either fight or make a deal or something.
If I can like say something to complete your answer, I think that we never saw at the moment one real conflict except one, that it's India and Pakistan with involved nuclear powers. So I think that if there is any type of conflict between Russia and China, Russia and China will end soon. So this because when you are engaging something that is connected to nuclear powers, it's very difficult to understand what will happen. This is the main reason why there is not a direct conflict and a proxy war in Ukraine, because if there was NATO involved, everything will change in one day, not in 1 year. So another question that could be interesting. What is your opinion on the recent Amnesty International report that it sparked a lot of protest among Ukraine supporters?
I'll say the report is factual. What is described in the report is happening. The reason most people protest is because they see this war or they see this report as an insult because they are defenders. But being a defender doesn't mean you aren't gullible to war crimes. I don't like going into these controversial things, but in this case, I'll stand with Amnesty and say this is definitely happening. Not to say that Russia isn't committing war crimes, they definitely are, but you can't deny that Ukraine is as well.
Yes, I agree with you. It's like in a war scenario. I think it's very difficult to. You can say that something is good or bad morally, but in war, everybody do bad things. I think also if a Second World War was finishing in a different way, maybe you can see a different history. So Germans were maybe less bad as we made it now. So, okay, another interesting question. What are your views on the Russian overture in Nicaragua and will the US response?
My views is that Russia is getting very aggressive, and this is not them by themselves. This is in cooperation with China. There are recent reports of China and Russia going to do military exercises in Venezuela, and that is because they want to exert their influence on South America. And as we know, there is the American doctrine of I don't remember what it was called, but that the Americas is their God-given right, so they will do everything to protect it. Which is why we see whenever a country decides to do something, like example Venezuela becoming friends with the Soviet Union or Cuba becoming communist, there's already talks about deposing the leader or invading or all of these things to destabilize the country because they will not allow a different power, an enemy, to have influence in what they call their own area. So
Yeah,
it's similar to Russia and Ukraine.
yeah. At the moment, this is why it will be very important the stream that we will make with Diego Mezzogiorno about Brazilian election because a little update for people that it's not into South America and Central America. Actually, we had in June the election in Colombia where it was elected Pedro. That was the first elected president that was not center right in the last 50 years. So we have a left president in Colombia. We are still having Maduro in Venezuela. There is a chance, a big chance, that in Brazil will win Lula. That technically it's left progressist that was in power when it started the adventure of Putin in Russia. Chile and all the other countries, Argentina, are a little bit unstable. Now in Argentina there is a power a government. There is a government in power that is Peronist. So it's a little bit like to explain for the not expert in South America. It's a little bit. It's called Take All Party. Because it's if you can imagine far right it's plus 10, far left it's minus 10. This parties takes from plus 9 to minus 9, so it's something that in Europe we don't understand what is it. And this is very difficult to interpret it, what they will do, what they will move. And this is very interesting thing because geopolitically the South America it's like the country yard of US. So it's very delicate question of what could be or what could not be after the election in Brazil. Also with a relationship with BRICS. But I'm trying to have some speakers also from South America, from South Africa in the next to understand what will happen about their point of view. So another question: what about the 100,000 North Korean volunteers?
Okay, so I've heard this question a lot of times. I also did a live stream before this, and this was asked multiple times. The 100,000 North Korean volunteers is just a gesture of goodwill. There's no way it's going to happen. First of all, if the North Koreans want to use their own equipment, they'll have to send as many tanks and weapons and supplies and everything for 100,000 soldiers all across Siberia. That will take a long time. If they don't bring their own equipment, they'll have to receive from Russia, and they will need training for that, which will take a long time as well. So unless Russia is planning for this war to last 10 years, it's not going to happen. And I don't think they're planning for it to be that long.
And technically, it's still a special military operation, so it's without like foreign countries or alliance and blah blah blah. Okay. Me and B. Nuclear plant. What outcome can be expected? Investigation and then what? I think that you are asking about Zaporizhia. So
Yeah, this is a very confusing incident for me because mainly it is both sides again. This is what has happened consistently throughout the war, that something happens and both sides argue with each other who did it, but no one really cares who did it. Because every single time an incident like this occurs, no one looks at the outcome. We first had the mass murder in Bucha, then we had the recently we had the POWs kills in Donbass, and then we now have this Zaporizhia nuclear plant. This is all purely for propaganda because the West isn't sending enough weapons, and they don't care who did it. They argue that the reason why Russia would attack its own territory is for a false flag, but every single time they argue that, but there has been no escalation every single time. So it's hard to believe that that is the case. So what can I expect? There are two outcomes that I see. The first one is that they actually investigate it and find out who did it. If Ukraine did it, then it is going to be announced in a way that they throw Ukraine under the bus and then say, oh my God, Ukraine is actually corrupt, so we're not going to help them. Or they will try to shape it in a way that is Russia's fault and send more help and extend the war.
Caitlin was adding to this question. I think is about the disconnection from the Ukraine power grid. They shot at the transformer that was going to connect it to the Crimean power grid. It could be, but I'm very impressed. I have some other question to put, but I'm very impressed that nobody asked about the magical explosion that we got in Crimea. In this Novofedorivka. So because actually this is a question that I want to say to you if the public don't ask. So what is your opinion about this magical multiple explosion in the ammunition center of the military airport of Novofedorivka?
Well, the official claim is that it was an accident, but I don't believe that. I think it was sabotage. What my question is, was it Russian sabotage or Ukrainian sabotage? Was it a traitor or an infiltrator? That's what I don't know. Either way, it doesn't really matter because the point is Ukraine hasn't claimed responsibility as far as I know, and Russia is claiming it to be an accident. So most likely it will not go and become anything more than what it is. People will forget about it, like all the other stuff that happened. But if Ukraine decided to take responsibility from the start, then it would be a quote-unquote direct attack on Russian soil. And as Medvedev said early on in the war, that if Ukraine attacks Crimea, then it's war because Crimea is Russian. So we could have seen an escalation or maybe even a declaration of war, which would be way out of Ukrainian hands. I think that's why they don't claim responsibility for it.
Yeah, it's interesting because all the time yesterday from the afternoon and today, because there was a lot of news about it. An official claim, as you said, but unofficial hypothesis was like that the new long-range missiles for HIMARS were deployed in advance, but it was over 200 kilometers. So from the best location that you can launch your missile was like or Odessa or Mykolaiv, so it was too far away. And so let's see what will happen. But I think that also for Russian to have like explosion in Crimea, it's a bad signal for the actual situation. So another question. How viable do you think peace talks over Ukraine are at the moment? Do you see diplomacy as appeasement?
I can use the official words of Zelensky and I think Lavrov, where Zelensky says that if any of the what's it called referendums take place in Kherson and Zaporizhia, then there's no point to peace talks. While Russia says the Ukrainians aren't willing to talk, so we aren't willing to talk either. So, of course, there is no viable peace talks going on or about to happen. Diplomacy wouldn't be appeasement. I think it would take what you have lost and then learn from your mistakes. And for example, if Russia says, "Okay, I want this area," and we don't care about the rest, then Ukraine could say, "We accept," and join NATO and so on, and they will be safe. However, that is no longer an option because currently Russia wants to take all of the coast, and what they already occupy is about half or more of the Ukrainian GDP. So Ukraine is going to be a failed state after this war. They have huge debts and a lot of issues that they cannot solve as a result of the war.
If I can show to confirm what you said, it's the same map that I'm showing from the beginning. It was pre-war, just the first days. It was like Russian propaganda from a Crimean website. So the main thing, I agree in what you said. I think that the table of the peace talks will not depend from Ukraine. This is my opinion. My opinion is that the peace talks will be pushed by Germany. This is my personal opinion, because the main problem, as I'm repeating for all these streams, is that Germany is completely dependent from Russia about gas. For example, Denmark has a connection to Norway, so it's still a little bit less not dependent by Russian gas. Italy created a huge amount of different alternatives and GNL. So we made an European Union agreement to reduce minus 15% the use of gas to reduce the dependency during the winter. But at least the problem is that Germany still not arrived at 70% of the storage of gas for the winter, and so it will be very big, huge problem, especially for the high consumption in industries like bus or whatever that you have in Germany. So about what you said about bankrupt state, it's still already now Ukraine cannot live without the foreign aid, so not after the war. But I think that if also military summary was talking about it, the main problem is like the Dnepr River. So if the Ukrainians will be able to push the Russians in the south, they can buy some time and they can try to take Odessa. Like to don't let's say to don't lose Odessa. That it's the main point of the strategic way of living of Ukraine. Ukraine without the access to the Black Sea, it's like unthinkable as a state that can survive. And this will be probably also another project, because in one of the first streams at the end of May, still military summary said that if you look to the map, we can see in another one, but there will be a chance to create an agreement between, let's say, the Western Ukraine and Poland, to make a connection between Odessa and the Baltic Sea. So if you see on the map, it could be let's say, a very good connection for an inter-exchange of goods and whatever. So I think that if there is a chance to a peace treaty where the Azov Sea and Donbass and Crimea will be recognized as part of Russia, because I think that it's very, very, very difficult that Ukraine can take them back. And the main problem will be who is not, let's say, able to read in Cyrillic. In the red part in the north, you have also Kharkiv. This is the other thing that it's to understand. In the Russian map, Kharkiv was into the Novorossiya project. So we have to understand what will happen, because also Kharkiv is the second biggest cities in Ukraine, and for sure Ukraine will be completely different at the end of this conflict. So
I have two comments.
Yeah.
The first one is about Ukraine possibly pushing back Russia beyond the Dnieper. Even if they manage to do that with an offensive on Kherson, they magically are able to push Russia back. Then the war will not end, because I talked about this in my Russian geopolitics video. The Bessarabian Gap, which is between Romania and Black Sea, it is a very important geographical location for Russia. They will not give up before they own that area. And Odessa is what they need. So not just because of owning the whole Black Sea coast, but also to defend themselves, as that would cut down the front line from maybe 1,500 kilometers to 200, which will save hundreds of thousands of troops.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like the map, it's to the border, but the problem is it's the same. You don't want a NATO to the border, and with this, let's say, new map, you got Romania plus Finland and Sweden, and so I think that you are increasing the border with NATO for sure. You said at the beginning of this question that it could be let's say, a chance that Ukraine could join NATO after the war will finish. I think it's impossible, in my opinion, because it will be like probably a pillow state, neutral, and it's what they want. It's like Moldova; they want some pillow state between NATO and Russia. And the other interesting thing is that in Transnistria there is the biggest ammunition depot from the Soviet era in an area that is officially controlled by Transnistrian army, but really there is like we don't know the right amount of Russian peacekeeper, but officially it's 1,500 by agreement, but we don't know. There is a military airport in Tiraspol. I went there 6 years ago. It's completely, let's say, still a Russified place, because it's still like to be in the Soviet Union nowadays. So if you go there, it's very interesting experience, because, for example, they have a community that is divided in three parts, that is Ukrainian, Russian, and Moldovan, and they're still writing Moldovan in Cyrillic. but it's like a Latin language. So it's like in the Soviet Union.
The second
Okay.
thing is quick, and that is according to the gas situation in Europe, and that is that Ukraine has stopped the oil and gas pipeline to Hungary, from Russia to Hungary. So I think that's very significant because Hungary was protesting against the EU when they mentioned the oil ban. But then they said, okay, we will ban all oil except for the ones that go through pipeline, because then Hungary would still receive its oil. But now Ukraine has cut it off.
Yeah, and you have to think that Hungary was one of the only country that was, let's say, left in a short list of countries that will be able to still import oil, not gas, oil from Russia after the end of this year, because we are still now there will be the new package of sanctions soon. And another news that it's like on the table today that will be very, very dangerous and complicated for the Russian. It's like on the table. I don't think that will pass, but the Baltic states and Poland ask like to stop the tourist visas to the Russians, because they don't want at the moment like to come. For coming to Europe from Russia, you have only three options. First option, go via Serbia to Belgrade and then move from Serbia. Second, it's to move through Turkey with Turkish Air, with Turkish Airlines, or another one through Istanbul. But the main thing of these two trips is that one flight that was free 400 euro before, now it's 2000, because there is let's say no other market, there is no other choice if you want to go by plane. So for the rich people, no problems, but for the others, it's impossible. And the third way, it's to pass through the Baltics. So go to St. Petersburg, take a bus, go to Tallinn, and then take Wizz Air, Ryanair, whatever you want. So the main problem is that it could be part of the sanction to stop also this one. And let's see what will happen, because as I said in advance, I think Hungary and European Union come to nothing technically, because it's a vote, it's okay, but it's not a big economy. And I think that the size of Germany will count a lot when the winter is coming. It's like the throne of spade. It's like when the winter is coming, I think that we will see some new things. What do you think will be Russia's move in the Middle East between the Cold War of Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel? If I can add something to your question, Charles, today I read one very interesting article where it seems that after I will tell you like the real amount of years, but I think 11. So, okay. Yes, after 11 years, it seems that Erdogan and Assad will restart to make the diplomatic dialogue. So something is moving between Turkey, Syria, and whatever. So your opinion about it?
I think that Russia will stay out of it. They have their influence in Syria. That's because they want their naval bases outside of the Black Sea, because Turkey controls the Bosphorus Strait. But other than that, I think the main goal of Russia in the Middle East right now is try to keep the status quo, while Iran wants dominance and Saudi Arabia wants dominance, and Israel just wants to be in its own area without any issues. And then Turkey also wants dominance. So it's kind of a civil war between Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia over who controls Syria and Iraq. Russia says, don't touch Syria, I don't care about Iraq. Turkey says they want the Syrian refugees out of Turkey. So they want their border line that is, I think, 50 kilometers wide out of the Kurdish area, which doesn't directly interfere with Russia's plan in Syria. So I think the meeting between Erdogan and Bashar will most likely be about splitting the Kurdish lands between them, so that Turkey gets their area where they can send their refugees, and Syria can regain more territory from what they lost in the civil war.
So I'm collecting. We are receiving now a lot of questions. So as I said in advance, we will try to stay in 1 hour and a half. So we still have about 20-25 minutes of answering. Okay, your name, it's the longest, and I cannot say your username because it's impossible. But no one question is stupid. So, objectively, what do you think will stand on the top and win this military engagement?
Okay, so we have to define what winning means to either side. Russia clearly stated its goals before the conflict. They want to free Donbass. They want to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. Denazify is very vague because there's no concrete enemy. If we say it's the Azov battalion, then about half of it is gone. Demilitarization, they have destroyed a lot of Ukrainian military, but they keep receiving weapons from the West. So that's also kind of 50-50. And freeing Donbass, they've freed Luhansk, so it's only Donetsk, and they have, I think they announced 70% or something around that. So they are closing in on achieving their goals. While Ukraine said the minimum requirement for a quote-unquote victory for Ukraine would be to regain the territory lost after the 24th of February, which they are ages away from, with lacking of Kherson, Melitopol, and the areas occupied around Kharkiv and Izium, and they have taken all of Luhansk. So currently, as it stands, Russia is much closer to quote-unquote winning, while Ukraine has, I think, no chance.
Okay, I think that in that case it depends because we already saw in the maps that the official goal was not Donbass denazification and demilitarization. So I think that one was a good goal to say that we won, but it was not the real one. Who is pushing Zelensky to continue the war?
I think the United States isn't that focused. They can give up on Ukraine at any moment. I think the two countries that push Ukraine the most is Poland and United Kingdom. If you have seen the video, there's a video of the United Kingdom Chief of Staff who says that United Kingdom needs to mobilize and militarize so that they're ready to send troops into Europe. It sounds a lot like they want a war. And from how they're reacting, that's exactly what they want. So the fact that they have Ukraine to kind of be a buffer state to destroy parts of the Russian military before they go into this quote-unquote war that they're preparing for. And so they want to push Ukraine to fight as long as possible. While Poland sees Ukraine as itself, a borderland that's stuck between nations that are powerful, and they are just flat lands, so they have nothing to protect them. So they kind of sympathize with Ukraine, and they know that they themselves don't want to surrender, so they're pushing Ukraine not to surrender because they are the same.
And if I can conclude your answering, I think that what could be surrender, as we already saw that the real goal of the Russians at the beginning was like to change the government. So immediately this was the move. Then all the Russian military analysis will say that it was a divergent maneuver around Kiev. Now, everybody agree that that was like the first temptation was like to make a regime change, that didn't happen, and like to take the southern part of Ukraine. So I think that it's an existential war now for Ukraine. If they lost the sea, Ukraine will cease to exist because they are not able to survive. It's mainly agricultural country. It's they will not have a way to export easily. So and I think that Zelensky is in a very problematic situation because if they will make a peace agreement with Russia, that it's very, very, let's say, disadvantage for Ukraine. You have private sector on the streets, so I think you could be easily murdered the day after. So it's very complicated what is happening. Um, Russia wins if survives. I think, Caitlin, that the actual situation, Russia is able to survive also by himself. The problem is that what type of Russia do we want? Because there is a lot of analysis of Russian inside Russia. We will have a Russian expat in the next month that will talk about their experience that they have to move. So you have, let's say, in a percentage, 70-75% that completely support the government. Most of them are like over 50, so it's with a Soviet education. This is why in Russia you have like so big support of the government. And also when you are in a war, you close yourself in a defense mode. So it's very interesting that I repeat to you, the problem is that what Russia will be after, because 80% of the Russian have the European mindset. They're not ready to change to Asia in the mindset, not in the sources or whatever. Charles, the debt Ukraine is getting just too much. People don't see how countries helping them are just sealing its fate. It's a land lease. At the moment, it's nobody believes that the money will return back from Ukraine. So I think it's fairy tale. So and the US are doing a land lease like Second World War, but I think that and after say what you think, but I think that at the beginning US was trying to damage as much as possible Russia, and I think Russia had a lot of problems in this war, unexpected. Probably they expected to have like a blitzkrieg and take everything very fast. And but as I said to you, I know Russians very well. I went there a lot of times. I have a lot of friends there. I lived in Russia a lot of months for many reasons. But Russians are able to survive. Europeans no. So I think that now we are a little bit. Russians said it bourgeois, like so. This is the main difference. If our commodities or luxury things will not go to Russia, it will be a problem. But they can live without iPhone, Instagram, TikTok, or whatever. If you take out this type of commodities to the European people or Americans, I think it would be disaster. And it's not a necessary thing. For necessary thing in Russia, you have everything that you need, commodities, whatever. So the main issue is what will be the new Russia, because it could be a new isolation system. So if you have anything about this, or we will move to the question.
No, you covered it all.
Okay. I think this will end like Korean War as an armistice, a borderline, and a demilitarized zone.
If I have to add my very honest opinion, away from the neutral stance I take as an analyst and come with my personal opinion, I would say that with the losses Ukraine has suffered, if like there's been a lot of posts lately about a quote unquote leaked document. I'm not sure the authenticity of it, but it seems very realistic. That a Ukrainian general reported that about 42% of Ukrainian forces have died or wounded or taken prisoner, which is upwards of 150 to 200,000 soldiers. And the most realistic estimates of Russian casualties is about 50,000, including the militia groups and Wagner and so on. That is 4-1 while Russia is on the offense. And that is while the Ukrainian military has to cover the very long border that they keep posting about. You know how to post on Twitter, the border is as long as Japan or something like that. They have to cover all of this, while Russia is only using about 200 to 250,000 soldiers to fight them. If Russia wants to take all of Ukraine, they can take all of Ukraine. There's no problem with that. The issue for Russia is that politically, if they declare war on Ukraine for no reason, just like that, it's seen as a weak move because Russia is really prideful when it comes to its military. Unless that Ukraine does something to offend Russia, like attacking Crimea, then there's no chance that they will declare war, after which it will be a very slow process. So as you mentioned, a Korean War style. But I don't think the war will end before Russia says we don't want anymore.
Yes, this is the question that was very long. So Ukraine was going to join NATO anyway. What the Russian did to grab anything they want? If I can answer to your question, I think there was no way that Ukraine was joining NATO, because also there was Angela Merkel went directly to Putin and said there is no chance that they will enter. This was, let's say, probably the last push to make an existential threat to Russia. But I think that the NATO members are not stupid. First, to be in NATO, you have to be invited, and Ukraine was not invited. So, second thing, I think with the Article 4 in action, if you put Ukraine in NATO, it's the same for Georgia. Because these two former Soviet Union republics are very different from the Baltics, because also Baltics were part of Soviet Union, but Baltics were technically occupied and never recognized as not independent from the US. If you read, like they were occupied during the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and they were never recognized part of the Soviet Union. Georgia and Ukraine, it's another thing, because Georgia, it's in a position that it's very complicated for the Caucasus. So it's existential threat also for Russia, and so another question. By the way, in the light of the sanction, what happened to the non-citizens in the Baltic states? If I can, like, what you mean, and you mean for Apolid? If you can say to us, because the question it's not very clear.
I don't know.
Let's see. Okay. Okay. Isn't UK entire military, including supporting staff, less than half of the Russian forces in Europe?
I don't know the exact size of the UK military, but that sounds about right. And with the current trend in European militaries, it doesn't look like more than half of it will be capable of war right now either. That's why I mentioned that the chief of staff said that they need to mobilize. They don't need to go to war, they need to mobilize. So they need to prepare their military, they need to expand their military to be capable of going to war in Europe.
if you want, like my opinion, I think unfortunately, and it's like with a lot of suffering of Ukraine is being used to increment the military budget of states. So if you see to Germany, it's the first time from Second World War that they're increasing the military budget. It's a little bit incorrect because during the Cold War, Western Germany was very militarized, but under the US control. But now it's like it was like 100 billion in military for Germany. It's not a good news, like for the other states. But let's see, and I think that the US pushed a lot in this thing because they wanted to increase the percentage of the military budget of a single NATO member in Europe. They were like pissed off that the US funds were the main part of the NATO defense in Europe and blah blah blah. So, okay. Okay. Latvia, there's people without citizenship left over from the collapse of the Soviet Union. Okay, I looked it up. I believe there is no citizens in the other states, unless I'm mistaken. Yes, it's like a polis, but I must actually like Russian people at the moment here, tourist friends, and there is these also fake things that are like going in Russia. That in Europe there is anti-Russian sentiment. I mean, at least I traveled a lot. I never found anything about it. In Italy, there is nothing about it, and there is a huge separation between the concept of the Russian government and Russian people. Like we don't mix both. Like one thing is the government, and another it's the people. But about your question, I will check it out because I have friends also there, so I can ask to them. One question for you. So now this one it's like especially for Charles. What you thought around the failed Kazakhstan operation that looked like a preview of operation in Ukraine, even how the social media push and promoted it?
Okay, so there's two ways to look at it. I'll just answer both of them. From the Russian perspective, I don't think it's a failure, as they successfully kept the current Kazakh president in charge, who is actually pro-Russian. So the fact that he's in the CSTO and so on leaves Russia's own backyard safe for the Russians. If you're talking about the West's possible color revolution or what it could possibly be, then yes, it's a huge failure, as not only did they not manage to depose the Kazakh president, but they also made it so that Russian soldiers are stationed in Kazakhstan, and they have power there like they have in Belarus.
Okay, I'm collecting the last one, or after this one, if you have any other question, we will stay the last 10 minutes for the live. For all the other people that want to put question, you can put in the comments of the video. I will collect all the questions for the next streams. So in the next 5 days, we will have another free stream. So we are trying to increment the contents. Okay, another question. Do you think that if the war goes on and Ukraine keeps losing land like the entire Donbass, or a failed Kherson offensive, that the Ukrainian people will depose Zelensky?
I don't think that, and that is because currently in Ukraine the military has power. No one can do anything except for the military, and the military is filled with people who want to fight this war, no matter the casualties. So even if they keep losing, they will keep fighting until Russia wins or they decide we are not going to fight. And that depends on Zelensky's political power and ability to take control from the military to himself.
We were talking about it with DPA and also with others, and the common thought it was that if there is the position, could be from the military, not from the people. So, as you said, there is a lot of powers in the Ukrainian army. So, let's see. Okay, wait, because this was the previous. Another one that was interesting, this one. Very complicated question, but we will try to do it. Australian National Review states 3 US corporations acquired 17 out of the 62 million hectares of agricultural land in less than a year. 28% of the total arable land in Ukraine. Is it true?
I have not heard about this specifically, but in general, yes, it is true that Ukraine is currently selling off all of their state-owned properties to private companies, possibly to fund the war, but also like there may be different reasons. For example, corruption. For example, all of their oil production or oil drilling rights were sold to the Netherlands Shell. So that's a similar thing. And I think it was all of it, or at least most of it, which is very bad for the country itself, as it robs itself of a lot of the money that comes from it. What they do is instead of what Russia has, with how all of the oil and gas and natural resources go directly to the state, instead they will be getting the tax benefits because they don't have the ability to mine these areas themselves. So they are speeding up the process in exchange for a percentage of the profits.
Perfect. So I will put another one just to understand. Like Charles already sent a lot of questions, but this is like this point of view. So his point of view, it's my hot take is that this war is a Pyrrhic victory for Russia. They have lost too much, and we will see the effect possibly in the years to come. If I can add something about it, I think that we need to see the effect of the geopolitical movement around the world after the two elections that I said to you, because the effect of the European Union sanction will be in months, not in days. So we already saw it. If Web Union can answer, I'm searching something to show to you, and you will see about the actual GDP forecast for Russia.
Okay, so my opinion on this is it depends heavily on Putin's political capability after this war. If he fails to do what he's been doing so far, like organizing new corporations and organizations with other countries, like expanding BRICS and the current economic ties with China. For example, I think it was February 20th or 28th or somewhere around there, where he made a new deal with China, where he increases the selling of oil and gas and natural resources to China. So it depends on his ability to diversify his economy and push the dependence on Europe from Europe to other countries, and at the same time his ability to allow the country to industrialize properly. Currently, it is a military industry, but if he can start producing their own technologies, their own airbags, for example, like there were a lot of reports that now they are building cars without airbags. If they can innovate and promote all of their abilities to do all of these things, then they, in the long run, as in 100 years, they will get benefit from this. But in the next 10 to 20 years, I think they will take a very hard hit. But again, all of the companies that left, I think it's about 28% of foreign companies that has left Russia. They are now owned by Russia, which allows them to get the funds and put it into the state, which will improve infrastructure and all these things. So it's kind of, if Russia goes back to being a corrupt wasteland after the war, then they will lose from this war heavily. But if they improve and become serious about ruling a country that is going to be influencing other countries, then they need to. There's a lot of work ahead of them. This war is nothing compared to it.
If I can add to you, like this is like official information about the statistics of Russia. So I will share with you the documents, but it's official. It's from 28th of July, so it's pretty new. So we have like the new batch of statistic of production. We have like cars minus 89% production, trucks minus 40%. And this data it's very important. More trucks than cars. Why? Because Russia has a very big industries of trucks. We don't have them in Europe, but if you go to Russia, the main trucks are Russian, so not European or Chinese Japanese. But if you look to the cars, most of the Russian market it's Japanese, Korean, a lot of Kia, a lot of Toyota, or whatever. So cars minus 89%, trucks minus 40%, washing machines minus 58%, freezers minus 52%. Manufacturing, so you see that like it depends what sector, because the biggest part of the sector it's oil and gas in Russia. You have minus 4.5%. Natural gas, and we will start to see what is happening. It's minus 33%. What does it mean? Russians are decreasing the export to Europe, but we repeat the same data. Europe, it's like the 70% of the export of the Russian gas. So it's very difficult to, let's say, disrupt this sector to Asia in 1 second, because you don't have a capability to create 10 pipeline to China or India in 1 second. So will be a huge problem. So I think in a lot of dialogue that I have with my Russian friends and connection, they were expecting of a stabilizing situation that was fast after the conflict. So they were not expecting a war so long. Other data, fiber optics cables, but nowadays it's very interesting and very important sector, minus 80%. How can you make new lines of fiber or high speed connection without fibers? Passenger cars, we already said, minus 90%. So, and then we will move to the last questions. I think that one thing is the war on field, and we all agreed that the Ukrainians, I think they did a huge job in containing the Russians, but the Russians are winning on field. But the problem is what will happen after, because if you will have Russia that will be isolated from the Western markets, it will be very big to take as a hit, because the economy was completely interconnected with the West. You can say that it's not, but it was. So let's see what will happen. My prevision, my forecast, I still expect something will change. October, November, when it's getting cold, I think that someone will try to push to a peace. Let's see. Okay, last two questions and we finish. One from Charles and one fast. What is your opinion on the ban on Russian artists, athletes, musicians, and scientists?
I think that it is completely weird and wrong. You don't punish a country for invading another country by banning their culture. That is what authoritative what's it called? Dictatorships did. and that's not what free democratic countries do. What we were supposed to do is, for example, in the Olympics, have them play under no flag, for example, not completely outrule them from participating, which only further animizes builds animosity between Russia and the West. What they're doing is destroying their relations with the country instead of using the relations they have to improve the situation. I think it's a bad political move and a bad human move.
I agree with you, and this is why the main idea of this thing is like to create more dialogue. So, uh, and this project started only 2 months ago. So we already have a huge panel of people that is doing it for volunteer, and when we will have minimum 3 Russian speaker in the next week. So it will be very interesting for you to understand their point of view with different background and mentality. So it will not be the typical Russian people that you think. It will be one professor from GIMO, one from Carnegie Institute. I saw in your source that you are using them from Moscow, and one Russian expert that is out of the country now. So the last two questions, and we will close. Charles, do you think that the war has damaged the political power and the resources of the oligarchs, or they are adapting?
Well, if they weren't adapting, then they wouldn't have become rich in the first place. Of course, they are adapting, but yes, the war has damaged the political power and resources of the oligarchs. But that isn't the main part. The main part was back when he got rid of the richest person in Russia. Putin has always had his iron fist on the oligarchs, and they can't do anything other than what he allows them to. If they step over a red line he has placed, then they lose all their power, and they aren't able to win against him because he is the president. He is the most powerful man in Russia, and he also has the popular support of both the population and the military. So they have no real power with just money.
I agree with you. And if anybody don't know what happened in the first year of the Putin government, check what happened to Yukos and Khodorkovsky, so you will understand that the oligarchs are let's say, as you said before, free to do everything except if it's something that it's against the will of the government. So it's very complicated, but in my personal opinion, I can say to you that the people with a lot of money, like oligarchs, billionaires, knew about the war before. So there was a huge amount of money moved, for example, in Singapore, or there is a lot of Russian now in Dubai because you are free to go in the Emirates without any problems. They tried to move all the yacht that they were able to move from Europe to Dubai. But for the rest, they were for sure sequestrated and like take out from their property, but it's something temporary because you cannot take one private property for, like, let's say a war reason or whatever. It's very complicated nowadays. In the past it was not like this. During the war you confiscated everything of the other countries citizenship and nobody cares, but now with good lawyers it's very complicated to do. So, Gonzalo Ferreira, probably Portugal or Brazil. So good. One question: I saw in some videos that some Central Asian countries are politically distancing themselves from Russia. Is it true?
I don't believe so. I think, for example, I think what this refers to is, for example, I think I don't remember which president, but one of the Central Asian countries was in an interview where he was sitting beside Putin, and one of the journalists asked him, "What do you think of the war?" And then he says, "I don't like the war in Ukraine." And then someone was like, "Well, if he doesn't like it, he's insulting Putin," but that's not true. Uh, no one likes war. Everyone can say they don't like war. He never said that he disagrees with Putin's decision to start the war, or that he wants the Ukraine to win, for example. His position was neutral, and that is the best position he can have in that situation, because if he openly supports Russia, that will distance them from the West, and they don't want to distance themselves from the West because there's business opportunities.
If you want to look at different picture about Central Asia, we already made one stream with Philip Longley, and another one with one of my favorite author, that was Steve Levine. So you can check it in the channel. They were both very good. Central Asia, it's completely, let's say, not understandable for Westerner, and because it's very complicated. It's between China, Russia, India. It's a mess, and you have a huge experience of dictatorship or autocracy regime like Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan or whatever. And it's, if you look at this parallel, they're constantly in some type of war. If you look now, there is, like, for example, a renaissance of the problem of the Lakin corridor in Nagorno-Karabakh, and Azerbaijan, that it's historically, let's say, part of Soviet Union and allied of Russia. It's in war with Armenia, but technically now, let's say, Azerbaijan are treating as God Turkey, not Russia. And Russia is supporting Armenia because it's one of the only countries on that part that is still hosting a Russian base. Azerbaijan, no. So I think to understand that part of the world, it's very complicated for us. And as you said, it's better for the government to have like a neutral position, because your neighbors are bigger than you. So it's, I think, in the realism way of think the geopolitics, it's better to stay safe and with low profile. So because okay, we will finish with this one, and if you have any other comments, give to us. We already went 10 minutes more of the goals, so put your question under the video. This is a good phrase and provocation, and in a good way of thinking. There's only two avenues of communication available to people: verbal or physical. If you cut the option of verbal communication, you only leave the other option, and people have to communicate. If you want to give like your opinion about this phrase, and if you agree, you have the mic off.
Yeah, I completely agree with this statement. As if you want to, like, the West kept claiming that they kept having dialogue, but Putin decided not to. That is not because he didn't listen to their dialogue, but because he didn't get what he wanted from their dialogue. He kept telling them, "I have these concerns, and they are not going to change." But then they kept trying to compromise, and because of by cutting off the option of verbal communication, it doesn't only mean by not talking to them, but by talking to them and ignoring their wishes. That's also cutting off verbal communication. We see the war in Ukraine as a result of failed diplomacy, because the diplomacy never went on the same page. They never agreed on anything. Well, they might have agreed on something, but they didn't agree on key issues. For example, Ukraine never joining NATO. They know it's not going to happen, but they still disagreed because in the NATO law it says that anyone is free to come.
I agree with you, and it was only, the problem was only verbal. It was the same thing because Russians. Okay, I continue your thing, because Russians don't trust. Let's say don't trust Western anymore. after, for example, the verbal agreement that was made after the reunification of Germany, where Baker said to Gorbachev that NATO will never expand east. So I think that I'm not taking their part, but for you to understand their point of view, if there is nothing written, they will not trust it. So look at what happens on the social media thought. That's a whole class of people forming online who is think it's their duty to decide what people are allowed to talk about, and now it's spilling into the real world. So it's not just between states, it's a wide phenomenon. If I can say to you, but the truth, officially, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, it's banned in Russia, but 90% of the people it's using VPN. So nothing changed about social media. Let's say only for the people that it's super let's say patriots that think that Facebook it's a foreign agent company and an extremist, blah blah blah. But the main problem is that all people are not able to use VPN, and a lot of companies in Russia were working through social media, like flower shops. A stupid thing. Most of them are selling flowers through Instagram. So if you are able to enter in your profile, but the clients know, I'm destroying your market. So about Caitlin, and we finish. Minsk was written, but nobody give a shit about Minsk. So if you check what was written, was not respected by both sides. So uh, if you can say something about this, and then we will close.
Quickly, not about the Minsk, but about the previous one.
Okay.
I agree. This is a phenomenon that's been ongoing for maybe 10 years or more, but it's accelerated the closer we've come to the present. They first started with different rights and about racism. It kept escalating into us and them. And then we see now how countries started to dictate what you can or cannot say. And especially since Corona, governments started also saying, okay, now we are going to control what people say and do not say. So we have, for example, Canada that says if you do not use the right pronouns to a person, we can fine you up to 50,000 Canadian dollars. That is a whole year's income for not saying someone's preferred pronouns. That is, to me, it is insane.
I agree with you. It's like it's let's say it happened also in Italy about like people who were thinking different about vaccination. For example, I didn't have any problem with vaccination or whatever, but there was people that were not agreeing in vaccination, and they were, let's say, put it like in a virtual or technically real ghetto. So we saw that now Corona, it's like disappeared magically. Now it's technically a flu. So I think that I'm not into theory of conspiracy about COVID, the war, blah blah blah. I think that happened like it happened, and for sure it was a good moment to test something with the population. So you had some population that were more into the rules, some less. So okay. Last thing about Minsk, and we are finally closing. Minsk was favorable to Russia, so they were interested for it to work. What do you think? And we closed.
Yes, I think that considering that Russia was never officially a part of the Donbass conflict, the fact that there was a ceasefire was very profitable for Russia, as it bought it time to modernize and reorganize their military. But both sides kept breaking it. And I think the worst part is that a city like Donetsk was right at the point of contact, which is horrible because the people who live there can't just move away, but it is the target for bombardment. And similar on the other side, that Donbass generally is a very population dense area where a lot of people live close together. So that the fact that the combat was mostly artillery is horrible for both populations. As if you know the concept of shell shocked spectator, which is not that you are shell shocked because you were shelled against, but because you watched others get shelled at. That is also something that causes PTSD. So, most likely, after this war is over, we see a huge part of Ukraine having PTSD due to the amount of shells that have been launched. It's upwards of tens of millions.
Okay, so we are finishing. Me and B, you are still our one of the best viewers. So thank you for your compliments. As you see, I invited Web Union, so we have it fastly. I think that he will be a very good contributor in the next streams. So thank you for your attention. Thank you Web Union for his baptized in the Mazarin Geopolitics. So thank you for your attention. See you in the next streams. It will be very, very interesting with three guys from three different continents because we will have one from European Russia, St. Petersburg, I heard Gray, Marocina from Beijing, from China, and Diego Mezzogiorno from Brazil. So we are going to increase the panel of also professors. You will see the names. I'm trying to catching the best geopolitical expert that I like, or I hope that you will like in the world. And let's see what will happen in the next updates. Thank you to everybody and have a nice evening.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah.